Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero split up, and Juan Carlos Ferrero talking about a little bit more details.
The most successful coaching duo in Carlos Alcaraz's career was ended by a 48-hour contract ultimatum. A 2-day contract collapsed on December 17, 2025, and suddenly Juan Carlos Ferrero was out. Samuel Lopez stepped in, the official statement was carefully packaged, and the tennis world was handed a story about new directions and mutual respect.
The big tennis story of the offseason has gotten some new development.
Results were still coming. The partnership was still delivering. Nothing on the surface explained why it ended the way it did. But this was not a clean ending. It was quietly engineered from the inside. And when Ferrero finally sat down and spoke, he described a breakdown that had nothing to do with Carlos himself, and everything to do with the people controlling the environment around him.
Carlos's father, Carlos Alcaraz Gonzalez, wanting his son Carlos to train more at the Carlos Alcaraz Academy.
He said certain issues could have been resolved if both sides had sat down to talk, but that conversation never happened. In the end, he spoke with the people around Carlos, not Carlos himself. Cafelnikov went further than Ferrero was willing to go. In a separate interview with Clay, published December 29th, he pointed directly at Alcaraz's father and called it exactly what it was: parental interference that secretly destroyed a relationship still winning at the highest level. Carlos Sr. responded with one line: "Everyone is free to give their opinion based on what they know. Subscribe now," because that one line deserves a much longer answer. Here is the full breakdown of what actually happened. 7 years, 6 Grand Slam titles, 24 ATP Tour trophies, 2 stints at world number 1. By any objective measure, the Alcaraz-Ferrero partnership was one of the most productive player-coach relationships modern tennis had produced. Ferrero had taken a 16-year-old from El Palmar and turned him into the youngest world number 1 in the Open era by 2022. He won ATP Coach of the Year in both 2022 and 2025. There was no performance problem, no visible breakdown between player and coach, no results that suggested anything needed to change. On December 17, 2025, Alcaraz posted on social media that he and Ferrero had parted ways. The tennis world stopped. What followed was a week of carefully worded statements, vague explanations, and a story that the people closest to it clearly did not want told in full. Then Ferrero broke his silence in an interview with Spanish newspaper Marca. And what came out of that conversation quietly pointed a finger at the one person nobody in the official camp was willing to name directly.
The new contract proposal, including a salary percentage reduction for Juan Carlos, and that's the percentage of Alcaraz's earnings that Juan Carlos would take, that percentage decreasing in the new contract for the new negotiation.
Ferrero gave the interview from his academy in Villena, roughly a week after the announcement. His words were measured, emotional underneath, but controlled on the surface. "I'm hurt," he said. "I gave everything. I poured my soul into this project." He described a contract negotiation that collapsed in its final hours. The 2025 contract had expired at the end of November. According to a source close to Ferrero speaking to Clay magazine, the Alcaraz camp waited until December 13th to present a new contract. 2 weeks after the previous one had lapsed, Ferrero then received a deadline of Monday, December 15th to accept or reject the terms. He rejected them. The camp refused to negotiate. The split was announced 2 days later. Ferrero was explicit that money was not the central issue. The financial issue wasn't one of the problems, he told Marca. What he kept returning to was the absence of a real conversation, a direct dialogue that never happened between the two main parties. It's possible that some of those issues could have been resolved if we had sat down to talk, but in the end we didn't. The critical detail buried inside that statement: Ferrero confirmed he did not speak to Carlos Alcaraz directly during the final breakdown. He spoke with the people around Carlos. "I spoke to him beforehand to ask whether he was aware of everything, and he said yes. From there, I spoke with the people I needed to speak with." He stepped back from the player himself because he understood. Alcaraz was already fully informed by whoever had been managing the negotiation on his behalf. Within hours of the split becoming public, Clay magazine published reporting from a source described as very close to Alcaraz's years of success on tour. The source stated directly, there were significant disagreements between Ferrero and Alcaraz's father about how to manage the player's career. This was not the first time those disagreements had surfaced. According to Clay's reporting, the first documented clash between Ferrero and Carlos Alcaraz Sr. came in February 2023, when Ferrero announced he would not travel with Alcaraz on the South American tour and delegated that responsibility to former coach Antonio Martinez Cascales instead. Alcaraz's father objected strongly. Alcaraz went on to win in Buenos Aires and reached the final in Rio without Ferrero present, but the argument left a mark on the relationship between coach and father that never fully healed. Carlos Santos, Alcaraz's first coach, who worked with him for 8 years before Ferrero took over, went further than anyone else was willing to go publicly. "It's Carlos's father who pulls the strings," Santos said. "Carlitos has nothing to do with it. I mean, he would have continued as long as Juan Carlos wanted. I spent 8 years with him and 7 with Juan Carlos. The same thing happened to me. I wanted certain conditions, but his father did not see it that way, and Juan Carlos had to ask for other conditions that his father also refused." This is not a theory from outside the camp. Santos lived the same dynamic. He described a father who exercises direct authority over contract negotiations, coaching structure, and team composition, operating as both a parent and an agent without ever holding either title officially. The situation was further complicated by a commercial conflict that had been quietly building. Carlos Alcaraz Sr. runs the Carlos Alcaraz Tennis Academy in El Palmar, Alcaraz's hometown in Murcia. Ferrero operates his own academy in Villena, roughly an hour's drive away. Alcaraz had been increasingly reluctant to make the trip to Villena to train, preferring instead to base himself closer to home and closer to his father's academy. Ferrero publicly denied this was the primary issue, saying the team had adapted and he had never seen it as a rivalry. But the gravitational pull of the father's academy toward the son's training base was reshaping the professional structure Ferrero had built, whether anyone acknowledged it openly or not. Former world number 1 and 2-time Grand Slam champion Yevgeny Cafelnikov said in an interview with Clay magazine published December 29, 2025, what most people inside the sport were thinking but unwilling to put on record. "The biggest mistake is when parents interfere in the process," Cafelnikov said directly. "I am sure that Carlos's father has a lot to do with this split, not Carlos himself." He then issued a warning to anyone considering stepping into the coaching role Ferrero had vacated. "If you ask me, I personally would not want to deal with the parents. If Carlos approaches someone directly, that's okay. The first thing a new coach should ask for is that the parents stay away from the coaching process. They can sit in the box, they can travel with the team, but they can't interfere. A father cannot be an agent, taking care of all the deals, scheduling, and everything else." Cafelnikov's frustration extended toward Alcaraz himself. "Carlos is a grown man. He is the one who can make all the decisions now. I don't know why he didn't tell his father, 'Look, it's my own deal. We've been very successful together, won so many slams, made so much money.' That part disappoints me a little." Carlos Alcaraz Sr. responded to the growing volume of commentary with a single public statement, "Everyone is free to give their opinion based on what they know." That response confirmed nothing and denied nothing. It was the reply of someone who understood the situation entirely and had no intention of explaining it. Alcaraz went on to win the 2026 Australian Open with Samuel Lopez as his head coach, completing a career Grand Slam and becoming the youngest man in history to achieve it. Ferrero was not in the box, he was not mentioned in Alcaraz's post-match speech. Shortly after, Ferrero unfollowed Alcaraz on Instagram. There was no public statement about that either. There didn't need to be. 7 years of work, 6 Grand Slams, and a relationship Alcaraz had described as being with a second father ended in a 2-day contract window without a direct conversation, driven by dynamics that the player himself may not have fully controlled. Fernando Meliheni, a former Brazilian professional who shared the circuit with Ferrero and knew him well, had described the situation months before the split became public. When the Netflix documentary My Way was released, in which Alcaraz outlined his philosophy of tennis and life with enjoyment as a central theme. Meligeni connected the title to something deeper. That my way is the schedule, it's how much, it's how. The problem between the player and the coach is about commitment. How much is the family going to be involved? Alcaraz's family is all in. Meligeni had already identified who won that battle before anyone announced it publicly. Today you have the kid, Alcaraz's brother, you have the father. Ferrero took the coaching exit the only way someone with his character could, with dignity and without naming names. But the wound is real, the circumstances are documented, and the pattern Santos described from his own 8-year experience is not one that disappears simply because a new coaching arrangement is in place. Whether Alcaraz thrives under Lopez or eventually seeks a reunion with Ferrero, something Ferrero declined to rule out entirely in his Marca interview. The damage Carlos Sr. caused is already documented. Ferrero is gone. The Instagram unfollow happened. The post-match speech had no mention. A father operating without a formal title but with absolute authority over contract negotiations quietly ended the most successful coaching relationship his son had ever had, and did it in 48 hours. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because the coaching situation around Alcaraz is far from settled, and this channel covers what the official tennis media is too careful to say directly. Drop your take in the comments. The most interesting responses get featured in the next breakdown.